Hello and welcome to the latest edition of my video series. Today I'll answer a question several readers asked, namely, where do I get the ideas for my stories? Where do the plots come from? Are they inspired by real-life events or are they totally made up? The answer is a combination of the above. I guess there's a real-life experience at the heart of every story, whether it's a conscious process or not. When I look back on my books to answer this question, I found there are several types. Some plots hatch all by themselves in my mind. Other times I have to work really hard at it. It seems to vary each time. One example of a plot that seems to hatch all by itself and pop into my mind is Uncharted, the first book of my serendipity action-adventure romances. It's based on my own experiences because I really did sail around the Caribbean and experience lots of amazing things. It didn't take much to exaggerate a real-life experience, combine it with events I heard about through the grapevine, and turned it into a whole new story. Kind of like a tall tale, right? And in a way, every memorable story is just that, something related to real life, but so out there that it fascinates the reader and pulls them into a whole new world. When someone mentioned writing an action-adventure romance along the lines of Romancing the Stone, I had an idea right away. It started with a quiet little beach town with a bay full of anchored sailboats, just like one of my favorite places. And it ends in a historic Spanish convent, just like one I visited in a totally different part of Central America. And pretty soon, my mind was whipping off a million crazy events that could happen to our adventurous hero and heroine on their way to their happily ever after, once they outwit the armed mercenaries after them for a crime they didn't commit, of course. So a quiet, real-life experience can easily turn into a great adventure, and the story pretty much writes itself. Another example of that is the story of Salvation, Blue Moon Saloon Book 4, in which Todd, a bear shifter who's been assumed dead, finds his way back to his relatives, only to find he has a son he didn't know about. A son his cousin, Soren, has adopted and is raising with the baby's mother, Sarah. Soren and Sarah love each other and the baby, so what will poor Todd do? As unlikely as that story sounds, it all stems from the true story of my great-uncle, who was thought dead in World War II. His wife was pregnant when he went to war, and when he was reported dead, she eventually settled down with a second husband. But the baby's father wasn't dead. He survived prison camp and came home after many years. A tragic situation for everyone involved. In that case, the baby's biological father left and started a whole new life, leaving his son behind rather than ripping him away from the only father the baby knew, his stepfather, that is. It was only many years later that the biological father and son met in a very emotional reunion. So I took those basic events and turned them into the much happier end version in Salvation, Blue Moon Saloon, Book 4. So that's one way a plot might be born, from real-life inspiration. There are times, however, when coming up with a plot is a much longer, deliberate process. For example, I started my Blue Moon Saloon series with a very clear idea about the characters and the general idea. A pair of bear shifter brothers who meet two wolf shifter sisters when they come to Arizona to take over a defunct saloon. That part was easy. But figuring out the actual storyline took a lot of time. I really had to sit down with paper and pencil and start working it out. I love second chance romances, in part because my husband and I have lived one, with a lot of getting together, breaking up, then coming together again in our early days. So I knew I wanted that to be a big part of the story. But what else? That series took months to develop while I was still working on the Twin Moon series. In cases like that, it often happens that once I get the idea for a villain, things move along more quickly. And the villain in the Blue Moon Saloon series is a really good one that also echoes real-life bad guys. If you've read the series, you know what I mean. If you haven't, well, I won't spoil the surprise. Suffice to say, it took a lot of walks in the woods and a lot of jotting notes on scraps of paper before I finally had a full plot. The reunion of two star-crossed lovers, the process of getting the saloon going, the ghosts that still haunted their relationship, and the dramatic events that eventually brought those lovers back together again. In the end, it was a great story with a lot of emotion and passion. So Some of my favorite stories develop in a totally different way, though. When a tiny little mention of something turns into a huge thing with a life of its own without me even intending it. That was the case with Desert Rose, one of my personal favorites among my books. Axel, the boar shifter hero, was originally just a minor character who stepped on stage when I needed an interruption to a quiet weekend getaway two other characters were having as part of their happily ever after. That was Ty and Lana in the short story Desert Wolf 2, Strangers in the Night. Axel wasn't even referred to by name in that story, but somehow he stuck in my head, and before I knew it, I had a whole new story on my hands, a story I never intended to write. But the characters and emotions were so strong, I ended up adding a whole new book to my Twin Moon series. I even delayed writing the next story, Desert Roots, to write Desert Rose first. I finally finished Desert Roots, by the way, and I'm happy to say it's releasing very soon, March 28th, 2017. Anyway, I remember watching a making of the Lord of the Rings documentary in which Peter Jackson, the director, said making the movie was like laying tracks in front of a runaway train, everything speeding along, almost out of control. Writing Axel's story was a lot like that because one great idea built on another and the whole story just hammered along. The same thing happened with Harrison, the Sasquatch hero of Sasquatch Surprise. Like Axel, he started out as a minor reference and went on to earn a great story of his own. So, I hope that answers your question of where plot ideas come from. Many thanks to Diana, Andy, Monica, and many other readers for posing the question in the first place. I'm happy to answer more questions, so feel free to drop me a line anytime. The best place to do that is by commenting on my Facebook page, Anna Lowe Books. Thanks so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this little look into a writer's mind. I'll be back soon with another video episode, so stay tuned.